we are really officially excited to welcome for the first time on the show, Brett McMurphy joining us now. And Brett, really excited to have you on. Thanks for some time this morning. And how are things in your world?
Hey, Billy, good to talk to you. Yeah, busy as ever. I remember the good old days, maybe three, 3 or 4 years ago when NFL coaches would actually get fired in season before any college coaches. But yeah, that's the good old days. That doesn't happen anymore.
No, it doesn't. And this coaching carousel heating up, what is your take on it? Because this is, trending to be one of the craziest and seemingly most aggressive that we've seen in a minute now.
Yeah, I think what are we at? We're at 7 openings right now. If you include Stanford, which announced before the season that Frank Wright would just be a 1 year stopover until next year. And there's still going to be more. I mean, Billy Napier, will not return next year. I think that's pretty obvious to everybody, unless the Gators win out. Kind of iffy. There's some other potential openings that could happen depending how teams play down the stretch. Some power teams. I think, Billy, one thing that's kind of struck me and probably a lot of people is the amount of these buyouts is astronomical. And look, I don't have a problem with that. If you could, everyone should be able to make as much money as you can. But these athletic directors in these universities have basically been taken advantage of, or basically just they're playing a game of poker. They just got lost all their money because these agents have been able to get these crazy buyouts and put fear into these athletic departments and ads and universities that, hey, if you don't make this a big number, somebody could come along and swipe your coach and then he's gone. And so they agree to these deals. And James Franklin will be getting 48 million. Jimbo Fisher got close to 80 million. And the schools are crying about not having any money. The Big Ten considering private equity, yet they're willing to toss away, huge amounts of money to hire a new coach. So it's funny. When you need to find the money, you can find the money. But like you said, there's still going to be a lot more moves, I think, before we get to. I was going to say before the end of the year, probably before we get to November.
And do you see any other ACC jobs kind of coming open? Virginia Tech, obviously, one right now. It seems like the league is somewhat in a state of things being okay for the most part with their coaching staffs. I think the ACC is a league that is maybe taking a little bit more of an approach of let's revamp and get a GM in a role, and let's try to make things work that way. Do you see any movement in the rest of the league?
I don't. The only unknown is North Carolina. There's been a billion reports. I'm sorry, 1,000,000,001. A new one just came out. A bill, a billion reports on what's going on with Belichick. The truth is somewhere in the middle. So we'll see. Obviously, that's something to keep an eye on. Florida State. That could be a hard conversation. I mean, they're there at 3-3. I think last year was obviously an anomaly for Norvell and Florida State. But now, if you run this back this year, and say you go 6-6 or 5-7, then what happens? Obviously, they've got a big number there to if they want to buy out Mike Norvell. I'm not considering they were going to do that. But if how these teams fare in the second half of the season, where some of these coaches you would think, hey, this guy's pretty safe, and then suddenly the season starts circling the drain. I think these ads and these universities have shown, we can't just wait around and hope something happens. We've got to make a change. So I would think, North Carolina and Florida State would probably be the only possibilities. I don't think those are likely. I want to be clear on that, but I think there are possibilities depending on what happens the second half of the season.
Let's talk about this college football playoff race and how the ACC now fully involved, with Miami being the number 2 team in the country, arguably the number 1 team. You've spent an incredible amount of time in the state of Florida throughout your career. Let's start with Miami. What they've done to put together the roster that they have, and now finally, seemingly, putting together all of those key wins at the right time to get to this, state of their program. What have you heard about, that development and how difficult of a task it has been for Mario Cristobal to finally push this, at least from what it seems like, to now where they're going to be perennially in the race for national championship?
Yeah, I mean, I was at the Notre Dame Miami game, the season opener down in Miami, and got to talk to Cristobal, and they're very impressive. And before the season, I thought that actually Miami would be a better team. I thought the offense would not be as dynamic, not as electric, but I knew the defense would be much better. I mean, it had to be. Last year, their defense was horrific, and I want to apologize to the word horrific for that characterization. But they were just bad. And now the defense is so good that both offensive and defensive lines are among the best in the nation. A lot of that can be attributed to Cristobal's background as an offensive lineman and the importance of being good in the trenches. Uh, if you guys haven't seen Ruben Bain, Miami's defensive end, I'm not going to say arguably because I do believe he is the best defensive player in the country right now. And the offense has gotten more steady. At the Notre Dame game, I remarked to somebody. I said, Carson Beck's thrown a number of checkdowns, a lot of short crossing patterns, and this guy from Miami said we've thrown more checkdowns in the first half against Notre Dame than we did the entire all of last season with Cam Ward. And that's not a shot at Cam Ward. It's just they went, the big risk or reward plays, going deep a lot of times, paid off a lot of times. Sometimes there are a lot of crucial turnovers. And so I think they've been more methodical, if you will, on offense. And as of now, in the past they've got bit by some big upsets, some dumb play, some they lose it. Last year they're set to go to the playoff, and then they lose 2 of their last 3 at Georgia Tech, at Syracuse again when the defense can't stop Syracuse. So it looks like those things have changed. We'll have to see. I think one of the most impressive things about Miami is up until the Florida State game, Florida State's the first team that outgained Miami going back 23 consecutive games. So that's going back into 2023. So, most times, I mean, it's not foolproof, but most times if you have more yardage than your opponent, you know, barring a lot of fluky turnovers, a huge amount of penalties, you're probably going to win most of those games. So I think that's probably what's been most impressive for me. And that win against Notre Dame, some people question Notre Dame out of the gate. They lost, by a total of 4 points to Miami and Texas A&M. That win looks better and better every week. That's why I have Miami number 1 on my AP ballot. But again, we've seen this before. Last year they were, 9-0 till they got to the final 3 weeks. The schedule sets up they should be, 9-0. They should be 12-0. But can they hold on to it? More importantly, Oregon was 13-0 last year, first team to win 13 games in the Big Ten, and they lost in the first round of the playoffs. So it's not going to really matter if they don't have a good run in the playoff.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what makes you have Miami number 1, and who do you see joining them in Charlotte if all of this holds true, or who do you see in Charlotte for the ACC championship as we hit the midway point here?
I've actually have Georgia Tech projected in my college football playoff field, and that's not. I don't do the if it was held today projections, because that's not a projection. That's a snapshot of right now, which of course it's not going to look like that. So I'm projecting Georgia Tech to get in the playoff. I think they win out within the conference, and then I think they play. Then they finish Georgia, which is a huge game, and then they have the ACC title game. But I think even if Georgia Tech would lose to Georgia and Miami at 11-2, I just think it'd be hard to keep them out. At Duke is going to be a huge test. They're actually a slight underdog. Duke has had its ups and downs, but I just think Georgia Tech. I'm so impressed with what Brent Key's doing there, and obviously Haynes King. I don't know if he's going to have enough big games. Certainly, they don't have any ranked teams left on the schedule other than Georgia. I don't think he's going to get the national attention maybe as some of these other guys, but I certainly think he should be in the Heisman short list if they get to 10-0, 11-0, 12-0, certainly. But I've got Billy. I got Georgia Tech there. Virginia's also got a manageable schedule, but I like Georgia Tech though over Virginia, and then of course Miami's would be the opponent.
Do you think this Heisman Trophy race is going to turn into who's the best quarterback on the best team versus maybe who has these gaudy stats? Because I think of Carson Beck, I think of Haynes King, those type of players right now. I mean, even John Mateer before this past weekend, where they aren't putting up these insane numbers, but they're gritty, they're leading their team to wins. That they're the reason why they're having these resurgences and things like that.
So let me tell you a secret about the Heisman process, and please don't tell anyone. Okay, I trust you.
No one. This was just you and me.
Yeah, so I went to Oklahoma State. So a million years ago, Barry Sanders won the Heisman Trophy. He averaged, whatever his numbers were, it's still an NCAA record for rushing yards per game. That's pretty much the last time statistics have mattered in picking the Heisman Trophy winner. It is a narrative. Who has the narrative? And a lot of what you said is true. Best player on the best team. But again, just think about last year. What did everyone talk about after Travis Hunter's game? Oh, he had 7 catches for 93 yards. He had 3 interceptions. No, it was he played 90 plays today. He could have been horrible in all 90. And look, I voted for Travis Hunter. I thought he deserved it. But again, it's the narrative. And at some point during the season, it's too early. We're just past the halfway mark. At some point, the narrative, you'll start hearing the narratives. You'll see them on Twitter. You'll see different media people, making their pitches and all that. And that will determine, I think, who wins the Heisman. Of course, along with how the individuals are playing. But certainly I think what helps Carson Beck is he comes to Miami. He was, I don't want discarded is not the right word because that's not accurate, but he was apparently not no longer wanted at Georgia, so now he's at Miami. Well, if he leads Miami to their first ever ACC title, that's a pretty good narrative there. And his numbers, aren't going to compare with other guys' numbers. If Fernando Mendoza leads Indiana to 12-0 in the Big Ten title game, that's a pretty good narrative right there. I don't care what his stats are. I don't care who averages more yards passing, yards per attempt, touchdowns, all that stuff. It doesn't matter. It's going to be the narrative. All these stats now, with the way offenses are run, it's all kind of mixed together. I can't tell you who's the leading passer in FBS right now. You could give me 5 guys, and I probably couldn't guess it.
I think it's Sawyer Robertson.
You know what? I read that yesterday. You're right. Yeah. So okay.
Shout out the Big 12 burners out there.
Yeah. Go Bears. So should he be in New York? Probably not. Baylor's middling around 500. So is that fair or not? I'm not going to say it's fair. You asked me. I'm telling you, that's how the sausage is made. And I voted for the Heisman for a long time, and I kind of have a pretty good idea how to read the other Heisman voters. And, so that's something to keep your eye on. I just tweeted the latest Heisman favorites right now. And, Ty Simpson's the favorite right now, but that doesn't mean anything. If Alabama doesn't win, most, if not all their games down the stretch, he doesn't have a shot. So it is a little bit what you said, best player, best team, but also it's a good narrative than of course the cliched Heisman moment where a guy has a great play in one of his final 2 or 3 games.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to watch it all and play out this season, and this feels like one of the most wide open seasons we've watched. I know the playoff obviously expanding to 12 certainly creates a lot more drama and opportunity for teams to do that, but it makes it more, I think, enticing for fans to tune in, of course, and see it all play out.
No, I agree, and I think I was joking earlier about the good old days 3 or 4 years ago. Heck, just 2 years ago when it was only a 14 playoff, when you were trying to predict the national champion, probably a lot of folks like me would sit there and say, okay, who can win the SEC? Who can win the Big Ten? And kind of narrow it down to that's kind of who my champion pick is going to be. And you nailed it. I mean, it's wide open. There's a dozen teams that have a legitimate shot to win it. I'm not talking about teams that can make the playoff. I'm just saying there's probably 12 to 14 teams that if they get into the tournament, they've got a chance to win it. And just because Miami goes 12 and 13 and 0 and wins the ACC, they're not the favorite to win it by any means. We saw what Ohio State did last year. They didn't even win their conference. They didn't even play for the conference title, yet they won the national title. And everything Oregon did in the regular season, didn't mean anything when they got to the playoffs. So that's what's going to be fascinating. No matter what happens the rest of the way, whoever wins the power conferences, once everybody's in, I'd say, I'd realistically, there's probably only about 6 teams I think that can win it, but I don't think it necessarily depends on whether those 6 teams win their conference or not. It's just simply, can you get to 10? Can you get to 11 wins and get into the playoff field? And then it's anybody's game.
Yeah, it really is. We saw that last year. And look, we'll see a lot more of Brett McMurphy at on3.com. You can follow him there. Is at Brett_McMurphy on Twitter. And we will have him back on the show later this year. So Brett McMurphy, thanks so much, man, for stopping by. We really appreciate you kicking off All Access AM with us.
Thanks, Billy. Appreciate it.